All right, welcome to our review for the chapter for exam 3. Now what I wanted to do is go over chapter 9, which was given to you back in week 13. But really this kind of covers all of the content that we've been looking at for the last 3 weeks. And so in this video, I wanted to go give you some highlights. Like I wanted to kind of highlight the sections that you need to make sure that you pay attention to. I'm going to point out some terms along the way and concepts that of course questions relate to. So let's take a look. All right, if you go back to week 13, there was this chapter 9 that I placed into that week. And so what we're really kind of doing is just going through here and trying to highlight areas that we want to draw importance to. Of course, the idea about market conditions, this is really where we're talking about risk. So what is price risk or market risk? This occurs when we have variance from buyers and sellers over time. So why do prices fluctuate? We talked about different types of reasons all semester long, macro view, micro view. Generally, it's this idea of that prices change, and really you've got this kind of potential outcome. By the time that we plant and when we harvest, these are our potentials for risk. All right, let me get rid of that. So this is kind of what we're looking at. Now, what are the tools? So let's make sure we can highlight a few of those. There are really 3 primary tools. Forward contracting, meaning we find someone else to sell things to us so we can be the buyer, or we find somewhere to sell it to. That's called a contract. Or hedging using the options market. And so those were kind of the things that we looked at in this whole section. Forward contracting is just a contract. So I'm going to, today is April, and I need to buy corn by August. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a deal today. That's called a forward contract. A hedge using the futures market is another way, and then finally the options market is another way. All right, let's move through here and talk about a forward contract. And really this has to do with all contracts. But really, when we do a contract, it's got really 4 parts. It's got the amount, the quantity, the price, and the quality, and then the delivery date that we actually set this to be. And so we have got 4 things that make this up. And so those 4 things are outlined in this section. Now, I talked about the buyer side and the seller side, but let's go through here. And you can see those as you look at that. All right, as far as commodity value go, things change over time. And so really you just, again, trying to focus on this idea of risk. So let's move through here. Forward contracts, and so let me highlight this. Forward contracts are difficult to negotiate because the buyer and seller must agree on a price that both benefit them. So forward contracts are useful, but they just get hard to identify. So that really brought us to the futures market. How could we take a second market and make a position in that market that helps offset our cash? And that's where the futures market came in. Futures market was developed, in the 1800s. And it was really a place that buyers and sellers could come in and do delivery. Now today that it's changed quite a bit, and now you have this clearinghouse, and this clearinghouse is what connects the buyers and the sellers together. And so you want to make sure that you understand the term called a clearinghouse. Futures contracts are written for future delivery of a specific quantity, and in fact one of those examples is that corn is a 5,000 bushel contract, and that's the details, and it has months that it's delivered in. So there's some information in here about prices, and then it gives you different examples of a corn contract has these delivery months, high, low, last, and the change. So it really just talks about how things are quoted. All right, if we move through how to use this futures contract, there are some terms that come into play here. Terms that are important for you to make sure that you follow is a buy is called a long position. Sell is called a short position. So make sure that you know those terms. Goes again here to tell you a little bit about those terms. We go through here and it gives some examples, talks about different positions you take in the market. This is important here as well. there are two participants in the futures market. There are the speculator, which are just trying to make money on the highs and the lows, and then there's a hedger, which is really what our examples are. So make sure you know the difference between those two. All right, that chart's kind of got messed up here. We go through the examples. Speculators, they just want to make money when prices are high or when prices are low. And then it kind of gives this table here that talks about why a hedger would buy and the reason to sell. So it's just kind of information. But really I want to get to the hedge in the futures market. How does that work? And so there are some other terms to make sure you're associated with. One of those is the basis. The basis is the difference between the cash and the futures market. And that's called the basis. Make sure you know how to calculate that. We've done that in some different situations. But finally, when we go through, the best way to do this is to come up with an example. So in my examples, I'm always going to give you a beginning situation that tells you who you are. And then an ending situation and tell you what happened. You're going to always set up a table like this. Now, in this table is important for you. I don't know if I can highlight this whole table. Yeah. It's important for you to build this table, and you've always got the cash market. Well, you've always got the dates. So the beginning date, the ending date. Then you've got the cash market prices, and then the futures market, and then the basis. And so if your basis starts off at a 30 and ends at a 30, in other words, it didn't change at all, that means that your gain in the futures is going to automatically equally offset your cash, which means the beginning cash price is the price that you will always get in the market. In this case, it's $365. All right, so if we move here to, and then the examples show you here the results. There we go. Then the examples show you the results. In fact, we can look at this table. We started out at 365. The cash fell to 345. The futures market also fell, but we sold and then we bought back, and that gave us 20 cents in profit. That means that we actually sold our corn for 345, but we got 20 cents back in the futures. Gets you to 365. Well, notice that was the same beginning cash price. So that's called the lock-in price. So you want to make sure that you know what that lock-in represents. All right, and in fact, in that lock-in, it was identified right here in this sentence. All right, so that's an example. There's another example here, and this one is an example where we are selling again. And this example, the basis did not stay the same. It changed. So make sure that you take a look at this second example. It looks like we made 30 cents in the futures. We only lost 15 cents in the cash. Now, we're a seller again. So 365, but it fell only to 350. It only fell by 15 cents. The futures market fell the full 30 cents. That means the basis changed. It was 25. It was 10 now. The basis changed by 15 cents. So that means we didn't get 365. We're going to be 15 cents off of that. If you move down here, it shows you the price. We actually sold our corn for 350, made 30 cents in the futures. That means we actually got 380 for our corn. Now, how does that compare? Well, 365 was the lock-in, but it's different by 15 cents. So that actually explains the 380. So your change in basis helps you explain the net price. But the key is always set your table up here and follow the same process that we've done. So I've got another example here where the basis changed by 10 cents, but you can see we lost 30 cents in the cash, got 20 cents back. So instead of selling our corn for $3.35, we only got 20 cents back. We got $3.55 this time. So anyway, these different examples help show you the idea. All right, now the options market is the one that comes into play later in our chapter. In fact, the last homework has to do with this. But the options are the same idea of the futures, but they give you the right to buy and sell. You don't have to. It's up to you if you decide you want to do that. Now, it gets a little more complicated because you have new things to deal with. Like, for example, you've got to find or pick which price you will exercise at. That's called the strike price. It's really the lock-in for you. It's what you want to receive as the minimum.
Now, options are going to cost you money. They cost you something called a premium. And that premium depends on what the strike price is. Kind of like your auto insurance. If you buy auto insurance and you want a really, really low deductible, that means it's really likely you're going to use it. That's going to cost you a lot more money. On an option, you get to pick the idea of whether it's in the money or out of the money, which we'll talk about in a second. But there are different terms. Now, options give you the right to buy or sell, and the right to sell is called a put option. And the right to buy is called a call option. So make sure you get those terms right. Really, the option, the call option, for example, is just a right to buy, because that's what we did in the cash market, was the right to buy or sell, and that's kind of what the idea here is. So if you needed to buy, then you would use a call option. If you needed to sell, you would use a put option. So that's the only reason. This table here also gives you more of that explanation, so make sure you look at that. As far as options go, the strike price, for example, here's one I did a chart here. The strike price is 230. That means that the market is right here in that row. So I'm going to highlight that row. Now, the put option gives you the right to sell. So the right to sell for 240, you could immediately buy back for 230, makes you money. So the market quotes you a higher premium. That 204 is really 20 cents. So you would have to pay 20 cents just to gain 10 cents in value immediately. That means that that's called in the money. It's real expensive as a premium. Now, out of the money would be the other side of the coin here. That's a 4 cent is all premium. And that means that you have the right to sell at 220. The market's currently at 230. You wouldn't do that. That wouldn't make you any money right now. But what if the market price fell to 210 or $2? Then it would become attractive to be able to sell at 220. So really you're looking into the future, and the premium is you're going to choose basically the cheap premium every time. Now the call gives you the right to buy. Remember, the strike price is right there at 230. Currently that's where the market is. That's called at the money. That's where the market's at. It's real expensive if you want to buy it for 210, because you could immediately sell it for 230. So that's going to cost you 32 cents to get that done. So that's not what that would be. So anyway, those are examples of puts and the calls, and that table just kind of gets you a little bit of information about the terms. Hopefully they help to make sense. All right, so make sure you read these things about the options. Here is where I talked about the higher price valued options are called in the money, and then the ones that are cheaper are called out of the money. So make sure you compare those two with each other, and they are right there. So make sure you know those terms. All right, as far as how to use these, it's very similar. You set up a hedge just like we did before, and there's some information there, but we need to jump to the examples. And so here they are, and here's the first example. Let's see, it talks about that let's see if I can find the full example. This is kind of a partial example. I think your best example for a hedge is going to be using the homework, because that last homework laid it out for you in detail. All right, hopefully this helps you review Chapter 9. You had two homeworks that had to do. One was hedging with a contract, and one was hedging with an option. This review is just to go over all of the content, try to highlight important terms for you. This is not the homework. This is the chapter given to you back in week 13. So I'm just kind of re-going over that, but highlighting those important areas to hopefully help you go through your chapter and highlight the work yourself to hopefully read that and make sure you understand that content. Help you prepare you for the test. Thanks.